That's it. Welcome to Moon Mysteries.
Take her to the moon for me, okay?
Okay, guys. Going to the moon. Okay, guys. Going to the moon.
You're listening to Moon Mysteries, hosted by Kayleigh and Gator. A show based on the mysteries of the moon and all of its folklores. From its origin story to its purpose and function, even how it affects our emotions. There will be 2 shows a month. One focused on the astrological placements and transitions of the moon that month, and the other they'll be focused on an interesting guest giving their perspectives, insights, and research on the history and mystery of the moon. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure to like, share, subscribe with all of your cosmonaut friends, and get ready to dive into Moon Mysteries.
Welcome to Moon Mysteries. My name is Kayleigh.
And I'm Gator.
Off to a great start. Oh man, I am stoked to be with you today. We have some fun mythological stories to talk about and some interesting articles to bring up to continue our explorations of the mysteries of the moon. So welcome everybody. Hello. Hello. Yeah. How you doing, Gator?
I'm doing good. We're encroaching upon a new moon.
We have some technological glitches.
Oh no, was I glitching hard there, bud?
Yeah, for a second. That's okay though. You're back.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm doing good. We are reaching into this new dark period of the new moon for this month of November, which is following. It's coming on the week of this holiday that people celebrate here. It's Thanksgiving. Some people call it that. Other people call it, Day of Blessed Murders and Twisted History, and there's many different interpretations of this gathering. But it is quite interesting that it's falling on the week of a new moon, because there's just fun things tied to the darkness, the going inside, and the transitions that be.
Yeah, I always thought it was really weird that American Thanksgiving was this month, whereas Thanksgiving up here was last month. We had it in October. But then, of course, just it makes sense now that I actually grow things myself, because winter comes so much earlier here. So there's people still harvesting stuff down there with greenery and whatnot. We've had a foot of snow for the last 3 weeks. So I'm like, yeah, okay. Now it makes sense. But yeah, anyway, that's good stuff. But yeah, new moon. So we did not record an episode during Scorpio season, which was honestly
pretty fitting.
Not
pretty
a
fitting.
bad. Right now, let's just let the mystery sit for a bit. But yeah, that was a crazy eclipse season, and honestly, those eclipse energies are still present. But part of what I wanted to talk about today was the story of Rahu and Ketu, the mythological Hindu story for these beings that cause eclipses. So that's part of what I'm gonna bring up today to talk about. And yeah, we can talk a little bit about where the moon's gonna be. So we're heading into Sagittarius season. So I mean, what better time other than eclipse time? You could argue eclipse time would be a better time for the story, but what better time to talk about a new mythology, or a new mythology to us, because it's actually an ancient mythology, but a grand story of adventure and battle then during the new moon in Sagittarius. So I don't know, I just think that's really beautifully fitting. So I'm excited to get into that. And yeah, do you have any crazy articles for us today you're gonna dip
I don't know
into?
about how crazy, but there's I wanted to bring up today the some moon lore, moon worship, some rabbit symbology in the moon, which is really interesting. The hair,
Yes.
the hair in the moon, and some of the darker aspects of what what a new moon brings. And with that, I wanted to bring up this really cool kind of rabbit hole I found, which doing the research found out that rabbit hole itself comes tied intrinsically to the moon, because the moon is our dark light. The moon is the dark light, right? It's light in the dark. So through that is the illuminary, initiatory type of occult responses and divination and magic and manifestation, all of the things 13 and watery and moony and psychic-y, so on and so forth.
And 12.
And so
12 and 13.
12 and 13 are they're what's interesting about that, when you look at the structure of the modern alphabet, the letter 12 in the alphabet is L, and L is God. Phonetically speaking, E-L-A-L, L is love, light, listen, and lore. And so that fits right in why L is 12 in the cipher of the modern English alphabet. But following directly after that is the 13th letter. So they are intrinsically tied together, the 12 and the 13, the L and the M. And so that's fascinating. But what I was getting at is vampires. The lore of vampires connected to the moon and high sorcery in ancient times. Vampires are considered to be high sorcerers, high magicians, wizards, and a lot of times connected more to the feminine aspect than they are the masculine aspect, where you get a lot of lycanthropy and werewolves. So there's this kind of like old folk tale that associates the blood moon to vampires, as well as like this old story that vampires would eat the moon, the one who eats the sun and the moon. So those are the two different articles we're going to get into there.
I love that that's what you chose to share. And I was like, so we didn't discuss what we were going to share beforehand. And I'm like, let's talk about eating the moon. And you're like, let's talk about eating the moon. That's perfect. I love it. Hell yeah, dude. That's beautiful. Cool. Vampires. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, if you guys,
for closing out Scorpio season for sure.
If you guys have listened to the Rising from the Ashes show, which is another podcast that I'm part of, we did a vampire live stream not too long ago, and so it's kind of been in the works. And I found the whole like eating the sun and the moon, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna save this one for our moon mysteries. Let's go.
Word. I love it. Cool. And yeah, once again, before we get into this, if anybody out there has got some crazy moon stories, an interesting moon conspiracy, or you have a way to get into contact with somebody that has written an amazing book about the moon, let us know. Reach out to us. I did just set up an email, so we will put an email in the description box below so that you can reach out to us and yeah, tell us your moon mysteries. Okay, so let's start with, I guess, the Sagittarius new moon. So we're moving into Sag season real quick here. And the new moon will actually fall on the 23rd of November for this hemisphere anyway. So I have the time at in my time zone, mountain time zone, as 3:57 p.m. on the 23rd of November. So it'll actually happen on at 2:57 if you're on the West Coast, and 5:57 if you're on the East Coast of North America. And if you're European, you get to do the time zone conversion yourself. Sorry. Math on the fly is never my strong suit. But yeah, anyway, so the new moon in Sag will happen at in the 2nd degree. So 1 degree, 37 minutes of Sag. So right at the beginning of Sag season, bam, new moon, beginning of a new cycle. Love it. And with Sagittarius in general, we're talking about themes of adventure, the larger guiding vision. Sag is the centaur with the bow and the arrow, right? He pulls the arrow back and then releases and then launches. So there's lots of themes of actually war associated with Sagittarius, believe it or not. So yeah, obviously, right? It's an archer. And for many, 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 many years, the bow and arrow was the weapon of choice and the predominant weapon. You know, so you just have the range with the bow and arrow, right? That you just can't get with the sword. So anyway, or spear for that matter. So anyway, Sagittarius has got these associations with war. It has associations with philosophy, right? It has associations with adventure, with the guiding vision, with all of these things. But ultimately, Sag, that archetype, is drawn by a quest for the truth. It's just sometimes that truth, those guiding principles, they're not always set completely in facts or in reality. And thus, you have the oppositions and the squares with Sagittarius, with Sagittarius is opposite Gemini, which is all about gathering the information and all of the data. And you have the squares with Pisces and Virgo. Virgo is about separating fact from fiction, organizing, finding the minute details, and essentially bringing the receipts. What are the actual facts of the situation? There is the square here between these two and the opposition with Gemini, which we will experience this season quite distinctly with some of the transits that we'll be experiencing, between what is the actual data, what do I want to believe about that data, do I even trust that data, and does any of that data reinforce or conflict with my beliefs? So there'll be definitely some interesting stuff going down for Sagittarius season with, you know, this internal battle of, you know, running up against cognitive bias or just challenging your own internal beliefs. And also, of course, as always, conflicts with other people where, you know, there's Mars is retrograde in Gemini right now. We have all of this energy of debate in the air. And yeah, that'll be a really interesting thing to witness play out, I guess, on the grand stage of life. What else can I say about this new moon? I mean, we're kicking off Sagittarius season. We're heading into, I mean, we're in the last phase for the northern hemisphere before winter officially begins, before the winter solstice. So if you have been tracking the sun on the horizon, it's moving gradually further and further south every morning as it's rising, right? Which is really cool actually to witness once you kind of have an idea of how tropical astrology works. And in Sag, the sun is slowing down. It's not moving as fast as it's approaching that most southern rising point. So anyway, it's a really cool season. I'm excited to be here to talk about, you know, all of the mysteries and all of the things. And yeah, I don't know. I hope that everybody has a good Sag season in general. And I think it's important to, since this is like kind of like the last stop on the fire train, right? Fire is about inspiration and connection to God. As we're going through the Sagittarius season, I think it's really important to really shore up yourself, right? Your belief in yourself, to just really strengthen yourself spiritually as much as you possibly can. I mean, why not? You should be doing that all the time, but especially during Sagittarius season. I think that's my main piece of advice for everybody. Yeah, and keep an open mind when it comes to debate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's facts. Yeah. What is another fun like archetype that to be kind of just an over arc of this transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius? Is it going to be even more of an introspective time, or should it be more of like a kind of a fun
Well, Sag is about adventuring outwards, right? It's fire, so it's up and out. I mean, okay, so if you think about pulling back of the arrow, the pulling back of the arrow is Scorpio season. You're going down into the depths. You're reaching down into all of the darkness and the shit and the trauma and the betrayal and all of the the not fun stuff to look at, right? Everything's dying outside for the northern hemisphere. Again, it's the opposite on the southern hemisphere, but everything's dying. We're harvesting things. We're preparing ourselves for winter as we're pulling that arrow back. But we can only aspire and go as high and go as far as we have gone down and in. Does that make sense? I just butchered that quote, but that's okay. So as you're pulling that arrow back throughout Scorpio season, you're digging into the muck, into the mud. Once we go into Sag, that's the release of the arrow, and then you can launch forward. So if you have been doing the work associated with Scorpio season, which is about cleansing and purifying and getting rid of the rot, the more of that you've been doing, the easier and the better and the further you'll launch through Sag season. So, I mean, this I think is why we have different, well, there's a few different reasons, but I think this is why we have these different kinds of feasts and celebrations during Sag season, right? Christmas, December 25th. That falls right in Sag, or right after the solstice, rather. Sorry. But anyway, so it's like we've kind of gone internal for Scorpio season. Now it's time to go back out and meet the world again. Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm definitely feeling a bit of that. I'm feeling like I'm ready to just extend myself outwards. I'm trying to go do things. You know, I've also been cooped up on a mountain for quite some time, so I'm all incredibly ready to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, dude, you had an eclipse on your birthday. Like, that's crazy. You're like, don't remind me.
Feeling vampiric.
Damn done. Damn
need
son.
sustenance.
All right, I'm gonna head out. No,
Life juice, no water. I need agua. Well, interesting. Let me riff on this for a second, because
Weird.
you know, the moon is such a beautiful thing, and one of the beautiful not folk tales. One of the things that we know about the moon is that it controls the tides, right? Like it has influence on the tides. Interestingly enough, it also has influence on the woman's tides as well, and the cycle of the menstruation.
Speaking of blood.
Speaking of blood, but salt water and blood are interchangeable at times. There was a man who, I should probably pull up this article, where he was replacing a quart of blood with a quart of seawater and ocean water. Now look at the similarities between the two. The moon is associated with the pulling, the ebb and the flow of the tides, as well as the ebb and the flow of the menstruation. That's creation. And, you know, there's stories that we came from the ocean, right? We emerged from the waters, and the waters of the womb. So there's an even deeper connection there. So maybe a bloodthirst is also a thirst for the ocean. And the ocean,
carnal desires.
So when I say I'm bloodthirsty, I'm just trying to hit the waves. Trying to get on my board.
Boy. Yeah. Word. No, I hear you. I love that idea of the moon being associated with fertility, and a lot of astrologers view it actually as an incarnation device. Right, like Hellenistic astrology, there's this idea that the full or the new moon, and we talked about this with Tom, the full or the new moon right before you were born is when the soul like anchors into the body. So like there's these 2 week sets of souls that come in on each new and full moon that are like just getting ready to be born, right? So it's really cool. It's called your syzygy. And it's actually a very important point in your horoscope that we don't talk about in modern astrology, but I've seen my own syzygy point come up several times when comparing different charts. And I'm getting too technical, but the point is there's like this long associated idea of incarnation and fertility associated with the moon that I really love. And yeah, it's cool that you brought that up in that way.
Mm.
So anyway, I wonder what kinds of souls are seated during a Sagittarius new moon, right? Like that's kind of cool to think about. So if you are super deep into astrology and you know your birth chart, I recommend you look up what your syzygy was and take a look at that. Sometimes it can be really interesting to compare that chart with your own natal birth chart, or even just having knowledge of what degree that syzygy happened on. When there's interesting or major transits happen to that degree, there can be some really interesting stuff that goes down in your life that's triggered. So anyway, just kind of a little tidbit for the astro nerds out there, because I know I'm not the only one.
I know I'm not the only one.
I know I'm not alone.
You're not, and we're amongst friends here. So
Right, I know that's good stuff.
It's really important. This is incredibly important. We've got ourselves into a pickle here with this show.
I know. It's never gonna end.
It's never going to end. It is the oldest mystery. You know, it's the oldest mystery. It's some of the highest initiatory mysteries as well. It is the original timekeeping. The sun is, yes, absolutely.
The sun and the moon together.
The sun and the moon together. Right? It's not just the sun calendar. We need to have the moon calendar. And I think with the switching and the swapping of that, it kind of shows us the half truth that we're always being fed in a sleight of hand.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I think you're onto something. I think that if we want to have any kind of a balanced society, then we need to merge these two and use both. There's some really interesting, like, polyrhythmic stuff that comes up when you're trying to sync the moon and the sun calendar. The sun has this 19-year metonic cycle, and the moon has this 18.6 year lunar cycle. It's not 18 exactly, it's 18.6. It's kind of interesting because that's right in between 18 and 19, right? But anyway, so yeah, there's lots of different cultures actually do have these two calendars synced. And I'm only just scratching the surface on learning about those. So we will leave that for another episode, another time when we've done some more research. But it's super fascinating stuff. I love that stuff. But anyway, what should we talk about first, my friend?
Let's see.
You want to pull up some vampire stuff, or shall I tell you guys the story of Rahu and Ketu first?
Let's start off with your article.
Okay. I'm just going to tell you the story rather than bring it up.
So this is from the ancient Vedas, right? We're talking about an ancient Vedic story.
Yes. So this story comes from the Rig Veda. So ancient Hindu mythology. And essentially, this is about the birth of Rahu and Ketu and how these two shadowy non-planetary beings came into being. So the story begins actually with the battle between the light and the dark. See, light and dark have always been in some kind of a war. We have the Asuras, which are the demons, and the Devas, which are the forces of light. And they have always been, they've always been at war. So when it comes to this particular story, essentially, as we dive into the story, we have this war already going on. And there was this event that occurred where the Devas essentially lost their strength. There was something that they did that they insulted some god, and they were cursed essentially to lose their strength. And all of a sudden, the Asuras were able to overcome them and started winning. So the Devas go and cry to Lord Vishnu and beg him for a solution to the problem. They're like, "Please, Lord Vishnu, the darkness is winning. We need help. How do we win?" And Lord Vishnu, instead of just rescuing them or giving them powers or something like that, he told them that there is a solution. You must blend some magical herbs with the ancient ocean of milk and churn it to find the elixir of immortality, the Amrita, that lay in the depths of the ocean. A single drop would make the drinker immortal and invincible. But because they had lost their strength, right? Because the Devas had lost their strength, and I mixed it up earlier, the Devas are the forces of light, the Asuras are the demons. So anyway, because they had lost their strength, they could not do it alone. They had to team up with the forces of darkness in order to do this task, in order to churn this massive ocean of milk. So they had to invite the Asuras along. Yes, we will give you some of this elixir of immortality. It'll be even and fair. We promise, we promise, we promise. Just help us churn this ocean. So they established some kind of a tentative truce, right? And agreed to churn the ocean together. So what they did is they went to the tallest mountain in the land, Mount Mandara, and decided to use this tall mountain as the rod, essentially, that would churn this ocean. But how do you churn a giant mountain? Well, they had to ask the king of the Nagas. The fuck was his name? So the king of the Nagas, Vasuki, the divine serpent, to assist them. So Vasuki, this giant snake, essentially wrapped himself around the mountain, and the Asuras and the Devas each took a side of the snake. Now, the light played a trick on the darkness, as light often does, and at first claimed, we must have the head. We must have the head of the snake. This is the way. This was our plan to begin with, and we claimed this side. And the Asuras were like, no. You can't have the head. We must have the head. So the Devas were like, all right. You can have the head of the snake. No. But what the Asuras didn't know was that Vasuki breathed a poisonous gas. So, of course, as the Devas are on the tail end and the Asuras are on the head end, as this churning begins and as they're churning this ocean, the Asuras are being poisoned. So, tricky light, isn't it? So anyway, this churning lasted for 1,000 years. And as this mountain was turning, it began to sink. And Vishnu, realizing that this mountain was sinking and they were not going to be able to complete their task, turned himself into a giant turtle and went and held up the mountain on its back to allow them to continue this churning motion. Right? Interesting, hey? So anyway, the first thing that comes up from this churning process is an extremely poisonous substance that, if released, would destroy all of the realms, called Halahala. None of these forces of darkness or light would consume this poison. They're like, fuck that. So they called Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva comes down, drinks the poison, and his wife or consort, some say actually the snake itself that you see around Shiva's body is what stops it. Some say it was the consort, but either way, the poison is stopped in his throat from going to the rest of his body, and his throat turns blue. After this, there were many other magical things that came up from the churning of the oceans, magical gemstones, magical animals. And in the earlier incident that had made the Devas lose their powers to begin with, they had lost the moon. Chandra, the sun god, had fallen and disappeared into the ocean, essentially. And a whole bunch of their like magical items and stuff had disappeared. And as they were churning the ocean, these things came back, including Chandra, the moon god. So finally, after centuries of churning this damn ocean, this physician to the gods, Danvantari, finally emerges with this jar of Amrita, the elixir. And immediately, everybody stops and lunge for the jar. Forces of dark collide, right? They start fighting immediately, obviously, because the truce was extremely tenuous at best, right? So one Asura, one of the forces of darkness takes the jar, and he's going to take it and only give it to his friends. And the Asuras are like, this is our plan to begin with, what the hell? And Vishnu transforms from his turtle and turns into this beautiful, captivating female dancer. Okay. And he seduces the Asuras essentially to give the jar back and be like, I will deliver it fairly to everybody. Everybody will get a piece. Okay. So doing his little dance thing, she, he, they, I don't know. He's doing his little dance thing, smiling at everybody, and starts with the Asuras.
Oh.
Or sorry, rather starts with the Devas, the forces of light. Gives them, a little drink from the elixir of immortality. There's one being, however, one Asura that is extremely suspicious. He's like, nah, something's off about this. That motherfucker, he's gonna trick us, I know it. This is the being that eventually becomes Rahu and Ketu. So he disguises himself as a force of light and sits in between the sun and the moon to receive some of this elixir. Very clever motherfucker. Can you, okay, hold on, just pause the story for a second. Can you imagine being that ballsy that you're like, I'm gonna go sit in between the king and the queen, and I don't even belong here. I don't have any skills. I don't have any reason to be here on this side, but I'm just going to do it and fake it till you make it. Like, talk about a clever individual. So anyway, he sits in between the sun and the moon. And as Mohini, aka Vishnu in disguise, comes along and gives some to the sun, some to this bean, and some to the moon, as this bean is drinking, he receives a couple drops. And as soon as he does, this disguise slips from his hands, and the sun and the moon realize that he has the hands of a skeleton. They're like, oh, you do not belong here. You are not one of us. And immediately Mohini transforms back into Vishnu, and he takes this circular weird-ass chakra weapon and beheads this force, this Asura, this demon. It was too late, though. He had already received a few drops of the elixir, and he was now immortal. But now he was just a decapitated head or rather a bodiless head and a headless body. He is now the sun and the moon. Or no, sorry, not the sun. Oh my God. Rahu and Ketu. It was too late. So here we are now with this demonic force, quote unquote, to force in the sky that is immortal and cursed with immortality now, but always seeking the other half, always looking for the other half of itself, and always plotting revenge upon the sun and the moon for ratting him out. And occasionally this force is victorious momentarily in swallowing the sun or in swallowing the moon, but the sun and the moon are so powerful that they continue and escape his grasp eventually. So it's I fucking love the story. It's really great. I think that this whole idea of this clever mischievous being, can't say that word. This clever mischievous being really embodies the energy of this Rahu really well. Like, he walked in there, no qualifications, no F's given, just sits down like, yeah, I belong here, what do you want? And then is successful, pays for it dearly, but was still successful. So
Reminds me of
the battle of light and dark continues to this day.
Like, I'm getting like the mercurial type of vibes in there, you know, the third solution to, or the third component of like the trinity of the sun, the moon, and the other part that's there because of their relationship.
Yes. I think that the third part is the earth. And Rahu and Ketu, like astronomically speaking, is really just the alignment of earth, moon, and sun. Right. But yes, you're right. Absolutely. 100%. It is the third component. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's I love that story. And it also kind of alludes to that the head and the tail of the snake that was being told, and the churning of that. You know, what's funny is I was listening to some I can't remember who, these two ladies, these two wonderful women, on their podcast talking about the occult and the Nazis and something, right? So they started talking about H.P. Blavatsky, and I was like, oh, that's right. I was like, oh, that's right. Madame Blavatsky, you know, I know she writes incredibly cryptically, and definitely going to get more into her stuff
I know you
here.
love that woman.
I do. And, you know, Theosophy has so many great stories about the moon that I haven't pulled those articles up yet, because I'm like, I want to save those for when we're already down the road a little bit, because they're really good. But anyways, this story reminded me of like something I had heard from Madame Blavatsky talk about, you know, that there will be an island or a landmass to arise out of the Pacific. You know, there's a lot of talk of the Atlantis falling, right? And it could have been in the Atlantic Ocean, so on and so forth. And that land has been lost, but there will be a land to rise again, and the sixth race to come, you know, because of the fifth root race kind of theory that Madame Blavatsky provided with Theosophy and all that. But the story that you were telling me kind of reminds me of like just, you know, islands in the ocean, like a big mountain in the ocean that is being surrounded by this serpentine wisdom force, this inevitable force that just is creation, right? The head and the tail, this centrifugal force of like what it takes to move and groove and be alive. And you know, she tapped into, she had wisdom of ancient Vedas. And so I'm wondering if, you know, her prediction of like an island rising out of the Pacific, you know, is coming back from this ancient history. And I wonder if there will ever be, you know, another landmass, because we know that there were landmasses that have sunken in the Pacific, no doubt. There are structures and temples underground, right? Like monolithic structures submerged under the water. You can go look at Von Galt's work. Her work is amazing. And she's able to
your interview with her.
Talking to her again on the 30th of this month. I'm super stoked.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, like, what about how volcanoes, as they erupt, they do create islands, right? Like all of Hawaii. Like, right? That's totally a thing. That's really interesting. Yeah, Theosophy's definitely got some interesting things to say. We can definitely get into that later. Yeah, and I think, what was I gonna riff on?
And just the aspect of like,
so we're just gonna move on.
The volcano itself, you know.
Yeah, so
yes,
the churning, right?
Yes,
the
churning.
Ocean of milk. I think it's astronomically talking about the Milky Way, Milky Way, and I think the churning itself is the motion of the movement of us around the solar system. I don't know, there are lots of people listening that believe we're a stationary body, but I don't agree, sorry. But anyway, I think it's the movement of us around the whole solar system, especially the fact that it takes, like it's stated specifically that it takes like 1,000 years or whatever for this churning to even begin yielding results. So that's like us moving through almost a whole half an age, right? A whole half an astrological age. But anyway, yeah, I think there's multiple ways to ultimately interpret it, but that's just
always
that's where I'm coming from right now. I'm like,
that's what's great
describing
about
astronomical shit, and I love it.
Exactly, and that's the way we need to look at myths, is the many truths that are within. Right, you have
esoteric,
yes, and the
extra esoteric.
Yeah. Exactly, and each of them have limbs. You know, there's many exo limbs, there's many eso limbs. You know, as above, so below. Everything in the mythologies mythology is like a perfectly painted picture, where you have the picture painted on the canvas, and everything within that frame is so fucking important to that picture that's painted, that every single drop of paint that went onto that canvas to create that fucking masterpiece is lined up perfectly. And that's what the stories are. They are ageless and timeless truths that lie within the many realms of understanding.
I wanted to add something specifically for Gabriel.
Gabriel,
Gabriel, this is for you.
you angel man.
Right. So in the story of the creation of Rahu and Ketu, while the oceans are churning, there's specifically 14 items that come from the ocean. Specifically 14. 14. Sagittarius. Temperance. The temperance card. 14. Anybody? Yeah? You're welcome, Gabriel. Carry on. Sorry. Yeah.
There we
Your
go.
face right now is the
There
best.
we go.
But yeah, like I almost forgot that little detail. I'm like, oh yeah, that number is kind of important. So yeah. Anyway, that's the story of Rahu and Ketu.
Can we get in? Can we just slightly not like? Can we just get into that a little bit more? Like the significance of 14. I know you brought up the tarot temperance card there, but can you just? Is there anything deeper you can let me know? Because I'm shooting blanks over here, bud.
Well, I don't know. The first association I thought of was the fact that we're talking. Well, exoterically, we're talking about the Milky Way, and we have Sagittarius right there. The Milky Way, Sagittarius and tarot being associated with number 14, temperance. Just that's the first and only thing I could think of off the top of my head right now. But I'm sure like in a week I'll be like Roman throwing all the shit. But yeah, that's just what I got right now. And that was specifically for Gabe so that he can make some connections for us. Not gonna lie.
Oh yes, sweet Gabe.
We should bring Gabe on though. That'd be fun.
Absolutely. And
fun.
interestingly enough, like during his work, he's lined up the moon. So our buddy Gabe, for people listening, that we're just talking about a person that you might have no idea who this man is. He's an amazing researcher and has a YouTube channel under Slick Dissident, and we'll might even just put his link in the show notes just for fun. But on his, he does this really, really, really unique and interesting research and work that he calls
Tarot Tories,
and where he has lined up the major and minor arcana of the tarot cards to the map of North America, starting on the Mason-Dixon line. And where the moon card lines up in his work is Hawaii. So that's really interesting because of the story you just told, and then the connection we made between, potential lands and islands, and that. So like why, serpent energy connected to inner earth, like wisdom, right? Like the Oracle of Delphi, right, is a serpentine that swirls underneath the mountains and gets knowledge through the steam. And so that's basically almost explaining like the inner serpent, the workings of the Ouroboros, the centrifugal force that is the spinning and churning of whatever this is, right? Whatever it is, whatever it is, who knows?
Word.
So anyways, I think it would be fun to have Gabe on and to talk about that.
Fun.
I digress, and I'm caffeinated, everybody. So I'm starting to like go off on side tangents. Got to focus here. Okay.
Standard. That's pretty standard. I love the snake symbolism. The snake and egg symbolism to me. Honestly, the more I learn about eclipse cycles, the more I'm like, that's talking about the motherfucking ecliptic. So, yes, we have some giant serpents in the constellations in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Scorpio.
Scorpio, also Draco, right? The giant one. There's a few. Ophiuchus holds a snake, etc. But
Ophiuchus, the Ophic, the Orphic egg, which is the egg wrapping the snake wrapping around the egg. So Orpheus holding the snake is really interesting too, eh?
Totally. So this is gonna be kind of. Hopefully you guys can get this visual without me pulling up graphics, but so each eclipse cycle, okay, because they're not standalone events, they're part of a family, a series. It's called the Saros series, and they always begin, right? The first eclipse in this family of series always begins at our northern pole, and each eclipse in that family gradually snakes down around the globe, literally. So if you go and look at all of the Saros series for one particular like family, like for example 145, which I believe is the one that we just experienced, the lunar eclipse. Anyway, if you go and look at them, you'll see like the path, the actual path of the eclipse. They've mapped it out, and it's literally spiraling down the globe. And then when it reaches the southern pole, that family ends, but it actually begins again. So it's just this continuous like
Wow.
going down the globe. It's really cool.
And there is a visual map of this?
Okay, so a really great website that you can go to is moonblink.info. Moonblink.info. So it'll take you to this website, and then you click. There's like a little link for Hermit Eclipse. This is a really great website for tracking the eclipses and seeing them mapped out in multiple places. So you can search the database for all of the eclipses that have happened and the ones that we have predicted coming up. I like, it's got this like, when will I see it section? Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, so you click on that Hermit Eclipse button.
You guys should be watching this on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, so then you've got a ton of different options there for exploring different statistics and all of the databases for when previous eclipses have occurred and all that fun stuff. And you can search specific Saros series. I'm just playing with the website now. Yeah, good stuff.
Day and night.
Moonblink.info.
Mud Lake Films, what's that?
Let's find out. I don't know. Click it. We're going on a tangent now. Good times.
Mud Lake Films. We like movies around here. Video technology, postcards from California, test cards. Interesting. Okay, I'm done. Over it.
Yeah, so anyway, totally explore that website. They have some pretty cool stuff going on there. You can play with the Saros series and kind of look at this stuff. But anyway, so let's move on from there. Good stuff. Eclipse cycles are fascinating. We will definitely explore those again. I'll probably have a ton more to add on eclipses when we come around to our next set of eclipses next year. So
awesome. Yeah, we'll have a whole bunch more for that, huh? Oh, I'm just imagining how much we all collectively learn each day, and then like you look at the year prior, and like, which is one thing with like when I do occasionally pop on Facebook. I've been meaning to like actually get on Facebook like once a week minimum, or once every 4 days, and I'll post a specific random like esoteric picture, and then I'll just like put a caption, and that's all I'm using my personal Facebook page anymore, because I realized when I would post episodes on there, nobody would click the nobody would get no new listeners. But when you post a photo, people are so much more attuned to that. So whatever. Point I'm getting at is they do the memories, and you'll get on there and you'll be like, oh my goodness, this was from 11 years ago. Just looking back. So next year during eclipse season, Kayleigh, you're gonna have we're not even gonna be talking about the same shit. It's gonna be completely different, and you're gonna look back and
I know.
What was 1 year ago today? What were you talking about eclipses 1 year ago?
Oh God, yeah, 1 year ago. Well, we were talking about the eclipses last year. We had one in the Taurus Scorpio axis, but the nodes are still in Sag Gemini. So last year's eclipses, we were really talking about this opposition between Gemini and Sag, where Sag is adventuring and going places, but the South Node was in Sag. So it's ain't nobody going anywhere, bitch. You staying where you're at. Because Sag is foreign travel, and the South Node drains you of that energy. The South Node is Ketu. It has no head. It has no way to eat anything. So the symbolism associated with Ketu is cutting you off from something. and spiritualizing that thing. That's what Ketu does. So we were cut off from foreign travel, Sag. Okay. We were also asked to change a lot of our beliefs, Sag, or at least address them. And we became super obsessed with learning how to do some new things. This is Gemini, learning how to use our hands. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, suddenly sourdough was all the rage because people were bored as fuck sitting at home doing nothing, and they're trying to learn something new. Also, information overload, Gemini. So that's what we were talking about last year for those eclipses. This year, it's like you need to be embodied, Taurus, and you need to get rid of the poisons, Scorpio. So, pretty different energies. Good times.
Nice. You know, it's funny
Okay.
when you were doing this, when you're doing the shaka, like down in Hawaii is the shaka. That's like a really cool kind of mudra or like hand cycle, because I just realized it's like it's the balance. It's like balance, and so I was like shaka. It's almost Akash. You could spell Akash with it, so it's almost like that Akashic type of like ecliptical. Bing, 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 bing. I love it.
Dude, this is the motion. Oh my god, there's so much. Oh, okay. Hold on.
We just
hold on a minute.
We just cracked the Orphic egg here.
I'm going through something. Give me a minute. Okay, so on the horizons, okay, on the eastern and western horizon, the ecliptic rudders like this. It goes through this motion, this of course people that are not watching can't see me, but it goes through this back and forth north and south motion, literally the movement of the hand, but like on the horizon. There's so much about Hawaiian culture that's deeply astronomical, like the hula hoop dance, motherfucker. Anyway, oh my god, okay. So I want to talk to you guys real quick about something that just happened about the moon. So NASA, I know everybody loves NASA around here.
We love NASA here. We love them.
NASA just launched their Artemis 1 moon mission on their most powerful rocket yet. So Artemis Moon's program first mission is now underway. Apparently this is the third attempt at launch. They've had a ton of delays leading up to this, including like the last hurricane that went through Florida, even damaged part of one of the ships, you know, some exterior thing on one of the ships. Sorry, I've got the article up right now. I'm just but anyway, so this is their third attempt. Really interesting. This particular mission is unmanned. They have a couple of dummies on board, apparently. I don't know, but anyway, this is an unmanned ship,
like prosthetic,
and they're sending, like mannequins, and they've named them. They have names, Zohar and something.
We are being trolled.
Female's name. We're being trolled.
That's such a troll.
Hold on, let me read you some of this, okay?
Okay.
All right. So liftoff occurred November 16th at 1:47 Eastern Standard Time. You know I got that chart. So this particular rocket is the Artemis 1, and they have a new Orion spacecraft which will eventually hold humans. This is an uncrewed test flight around the moon. Essentially, they're going to, around, and then back. They're not landing on the moon for this particular one. They're just testing this technology out. So, just want to read you one particular part in this article that I don't have highlighted, so I'm filling space while I look for it, because this guy's name stood out to me, and you might shit your pants, but there we go, here it is. Okay, Jeremy Parsons deputy manager of NASA's Exploration Ground Systems program at KSC, said during a teleconference on Monday that the work the Artemis mission team has performed in order to get SLS off the ground following the storm has been incredible. Jeremy Parsons, are you kidding me?
Whoa.
Can I read anything? Can I read anything without getting and here we go down into a rabbit hole. So for those of you that don't know, Jack or John or whatever his name was, Parsons, was responsible for the founding of JPL, which is essentially the beginnings of NASA and Jet Propulsion Laboratories. Is what JPL stands for. Deeply, deeply esoteric occult man. Ties to Aleister Crowley and a whole bunch of other crazy Nazi scientist type stuff. And this motherfucker has the last name. Like, what are the odds of that? I don't know. It's super
this is what you got to do. You got to take that article, send it to me.
Okay.
Take a screenshot, highlight the Parsons guy, and then post that into one of the Telegram groups.
Okay.
That will make people lose their shit, because that's really interesting. That means that the Parsons family bloodline, what have you, it is some sort of magical bloodline. If you look at the story of it, is still there.
Working through NASA.
Still there and still running it, because they're running this moon mission. Yeah. Something else that's really weird.
Manager of NASA's Exploration Ground Systems.
So
deputy manager. So pretty high up there.
So here's another thing too, which is interesting when looking at like these different moon missions or space missions and like the names that we give these things, and then putting the number,
Artemis.
Right? And so like you can just look at the archetypes of these characters in mythology and why, we're using Greek mythology, which is, syncretically what the forefathers of the founding of the country really were like into the ancient Greek. All of our Capitol buildings, they all come off of that, like the look at the money and the dollar bills, right? Like we pay homage to ancient Greek, in Heliopolis and all this, which is in turn ancient Egypt. So it's just interesting to like have these names and wondering if there's like an archetypal role that might be being fulfilled with it. But that's some great old conspiratorial stuff. Let's stick to let me read you guys from this book here. It's called Entering Hecate's. Oh, you got some more?
I just want to read one last little paragraph thing about what they're doing exactly. So inside Orion, which is the manned part of this particular spacecraft, is a moonkin mannequin named Commander Campos, which is wearing a new bright orange launch and entry suit NASA has designed for future astronauts. Two limbless mannequins named Helga and Zohar will test a novel vest called Astro Rad, designed to protect astronauts from the harmful radiation of deep space. So, yeah, that's kind of funny. A moonikin mannequin? I smell a homunculus, I'm not gonna lie. Where's one?
My goodness.
Okay, anyway. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I'll definitely post the articles up. And we'll link to them in the description box as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there. Okay.
Segue.
I'm going to segue in with some really fun, kind of light witchy stuff, because we all know that magic is connected to the moon. And I have about like 5 articles that are all they're all relatively short, so they'll just be a couple minutes a piece, and I'll slip through them real quick. So this is a book called Entering Hecate's Garden, and I'm just going to read a passage about Hecate and her connection to the moon. Hecate is the witch mother, the queen of witches, the Regina Maleficarum. Throughout history and before, she is the source of all witches' power. Through secret rites under the moon, and singing songs to her, and in cursing in her name, Circe, Medea, and others across the centuries have turned to their witch mother. Hecate is a complex goddess, which is most befitting for the true Regina Maleficarum. Her ancient and contemporary witches are as complex as she is, bringing blessing and bane to themselves and others through their witchery. Hecate, as the three-formed goddess within herself, is the primal shapeshifter, moving from one form to another, changing her appearance and personality. She is the anima mundi, the soul of the world, who presents herself as whatever archetype is needed by her beholder. She is the guardian for our underworld journey of healing the body and integrating the shadow and soul. She is our guide as we walk the middle world of everyday life, and she is the mistress of the starry road, who is born of the stars and the darkness of the upper world. Hecate is the benevolent force that fuels the world, driving the universe toward expansion. She is the embodiment of the force we understand as the goddess. She brings death, life, and everything between. She is primal, all things and no thing. Beyond time and time itself, she is the power that runs through her witches and their practice of pharmakia. When Hecate calls, we experience an awakening of the primal divine feminine within. She calls us to return to her sacred garden and under the mysteries of plant spirit and witchcraft from her garden. The power of witchcraft medicine flows. It is feared by those who seek to control the feminine, to guard the secrets for themselves. And she is the anima mundi that exists beyond the laws of all men, including any religious designation. She is more ancient than time, and we have struggled to understand her for millennia. In recorded history, Hecate was most likely known by other names as part of a great mother goddess. This goddess evolved and traveled to Anatolia and other parts of Asia Minor, spreading into what is now Eastern Europe and the Balkans. She became Hecate, adopted by the Greeks as their own, and was later co-opted by the Romans. The earliest records of Hecate, dating back to about 3,000 years, tells us that humans understood her as a mother goddess ruling over the land, the sea, and the sky. Hecate's cult spread throughout the ancient Mediterranean religion until the regular practice of venerating her on the dark moon was common in certain areas of ancient Greece. Ancient writers and philosophers wrote eloquently of her many powers. Her role as witch mother was solidified in many tales and by ancient practitioners. She was the Kledikukos, the keeper of the keys of all the universe. Throughout art and literature, as well as existing records of practitioners and scribes writing about her ancient followers, Hecate is always associated with witchcraft. While some feared her power and others described a benevolent yet fierce goddess of healing, philosophers described her as anima mundi, and practitioners petitioned her for their spells, while the religions venerated her as a mighty goddess. With the rise of Christianity, the reverence for Hecate and her companions was snuffed out, often with great violence. Her witches hid themselves and her keys. The complete darkness came. Now the new moon has come. However, Hecate is rising, calling forth her witches to return to the bounty of her sacred garden. We are nourished by Hecate. She is the garden. She is the source of our power and all life. She is the fire within each of us and is connected to the spiritual force of the garden. Our spiritual umbilical cord connects us to her and her ways that defy mundane understanding, and she is our mother who sustains us along our journey. We are eternally hers, and each incarnation is part of the cycle of life and death. We walk her wheel, that serpent of life. The true cord that creates and destroys, and the heart of the wheel is under the world, the womb, that which lies in the heart of the garden. Like all children, we have our own lessons to learn. No better examples of this can be found than that in the stories of her original children, Circe and Medea.
Beautiful. Man. What an interesting goddess. So while you were reading, actually, I thought of another association for 14 that does tie into this a little bit. So it's really interesting because we have these stories of gods and goddesses, and they change and morph over time. And with Hecate specifically, she's really dark. Like, some of her stories are really fucking dark. And I was just contemplating, I mean, duality, right? There's always good and bad to any archetype. There's always a trickster version of the archetype. There's always, you know, the force of light and darkness. So I'm thinking about this, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, 14. Well, there's 7 visible planets. Each have a light and dark aspect. So just kind of, that was an interesting little just association that just popped up while you were reading there.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. Thank you for reading that, Roman. I appreciate that.
Of course. I felt that was a good kind of segue to kind of get into these other articles too.
Ooh, vampirism. Perfect.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to start off with this one about moon worship. And here we go. This is the introduction to a multi-part, big piece of work that this guy has been working on for a long time online. But this is his introduction. Okay, moon worship. We have now to show that the moon has been in every age and remains still one of the principal objects of human worship, even among certain nations credited with pure monotheism. It will be manifested that there was a practice of primitive polytheism which adored the host of heaven, and however humiliating or disappointing the disclosure may prove, it will be established that some of the foremost Christian peoples of the world maintain luniolitary, it's like solitary, but with lunar, to this day, notwithstanding that they have been reproving the light of the latest civilization. We are so prone to talk of heathenism as abroad that we forget or neglect the gross heathenism which abounds at home. And while we speak of the march of the world's progress with which we identify ourselves, we are oblivious of the fact of the much ancient falsehood survives and blends with the truth, in which our superior minds or minds with superior facilities have been trained, and how few of us reflect that the signs and the symbols rejected theories have passed into the nomenclature of the received systems. Nay, we plume ourselves to the new translation or revision as if we are the favored recipients of some fresh revelation, not only in the names of our days and months, but also in some of our most cherished dogmas. We are the liberal conservatives in religion who retain the old, while we congratulate ourselves upon being the apostles of the new, that the past must always run into the present, and then proceed from the past. We readily enough allow us as a natural, necessary law, yet baptized heathenism is often heathenism still. Under another name, again, we are sometimes so short-sighted that we deny to former periods the paternity of our own fortunate offspring and behave like prosperous children who ungratefully ignore their poorer parents, to whom they owe their breath and being. Such treatment of history is to be empathetically deprecated. Whether it arises from ignorance or ingratitude, we ought to know. If we do not, we ought to also to acknowledge that our perfect day grew from primeval darkness, and that the progress was a lingering dawn. This is now to be the clearest view of the divine causation. Our modern method in philosophy, largely owing to the novum organum of Bacon, is evolution of the novum organum of the 19th century, and this process recognizes no abrupt or interruptive creations, but gradual transformations from pre-existent types, variations under domestication, and the passing away of the old by its absorption into the new. Our religion, like our language, is a garden, not only for the indigenous vegetation, but for the acclimatization, in which we improve under cultivation exotic plants whose roots are drawn from every soil on the earth. And as Paul preached in Athens, the God of whom the Greeks worshipped in ignorance, so our missionaries carry back to the less enlightened peoples the fruit of the life-giving tree whose germs exist among themselves. Undeveloped and often unknown, no religion has fallen from heaven. Like the fabled image of Athene, in full-grown beauty, all spiritual life is primordially an inspiration or intuition from the Father of spirits, whose offspring all men are, and who is not far from every one of them. This intuition prompts men to seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him. Thus prayer becomes an instinct, and to worship is as natural as to breathe. But man is a being with five senses, and his contact with the fellow creatures and the whole creation is at one or other with those 5 points. He is necessarily sensuous, endowed with native intelligence of Leibniz. He nevertheless receives his impressions on sensitive nerves. His emotions are sentiments, his words become sentences, and his stock of wisdom is his common sense. A very few words express his sensations, a few more his perceptions, and so on. But he is conscious of objects at first, and he deals with subjects afterwards. Soon, the sun and the moon and the stars, his bright lights attract his eyes. As we have all seen an infant for a few days fix its gaze upon a candle or a lamp. These heavenly orbs are found to be in motion, to be far away, to be glory of day and night. And what wonders if ideas of these images are formed within the religious mind, and if the worshipper imagines the sun and the moon to be reflections of the God of light, and pays homage to the creature which renders the Creator visible. Thus, in the childhood of man, religion grows, and with the multiplication of intellect and sensation and endless diversity of language, conception, and the faith is a result. Another result, of course, is the endless diversity of deities. Every race, every nation, every tribe, every household, every heart has its own God. And yet, with this multiplicity in religious literature and dogma, subject and object unity coexist with the student of science notes and profound interest. All nations of men are one blood, and all forms of God embody the one eternal spirit. To this unity mythology tends. As one writer says, we must ever bear in mind that the course of mythology is from many gods toward one. That is a synthesis, not an analysis. And that this process, the tendency is to blend in one of the traits in the stories of originally separate divinities. The ancient Hebrew worshipped God as the eternal, our righteous. The Greek worshipped him as wisdom and beauty. And the Roman as power and the government. And the Persian as light and goodness, and so forth. And few hymns have surpassed the beauty of Pope's universal prayer. It is the Te Deum Laudamus of the Catholic Church, which embraces the God-loved humanity. Father of all in every age, and every climate adored, by every saint savage and by sage, Jehovah, Jove, or Lord. The Christian, believing his to be the one religion, as the recent Bampton lecturer termed it, too often forgets that his system is a recomposition of rays of a religious light that was decomposed in the prismatic minds of earlier men. And further, with a change of metaphor, if Christianity had flourished and fructified through 18 centuries, it must not be denied that it is grafted upon an old stock, which through 15 previous centuries had borne abundant fruit. The same course must still be adopted. We find men everywhere holding some truth. We add further truth until, as a chemist would say, we saturate the solution, which upon evaporation produces a crystallized life of entirely new color and quality and form. Thus, Professor Nielsen writes, every religious change in a people is in fact only an intermixture of religions, because the new religion, whether received by means of convicting arguments or enforced the eloquence of fire and sword, we cannot at once tear up all the wide spreading roots by which its forerunner has grown in the heart of the people. This must be the work of many years, or perhaps many generations. We cannot better close this lengthy introduction than by reminding Christians of the saying of their great and good teacher, I am not to come to destroy, but to fulfill.
Damn, son.
It's pretty interesting article. I mean, it's very wordy, kind of cryptic a little bit, but like really just paints a good picture of like how we truly have kind of received, you know, the reality that we're existing in. They did a pretty good job with that.
I think it's really interesting, and we've got this sun and this moon, these two luminaries, right? And these wandering stars, or the planets, or the grahas as they're called in the Vedas. And like this one thing we have a billion stories of, so it's fractalized. And then in this article they're describing this conglomeration and coming back together again, because we're all talking about the same shit. We're all talking about the sky and the movement in the skies and the earth and the story of humans
and the blood
and the blood and the blood.
Hekate loves blood.
Okay, Romans on a blood kick. Got it. Scorpio stellium activate. But blood congeals too. Anyway, just saying. and yeah, there's millions of cultures on the earth, but we all have the same stuff running through our veins, and we all look up at the same sky. We all see the same thing up there, just at different times. And yeah, just the fact that unites us all is really cool. But anyway, I like that was reflected in the article a little bit there.
Mm-hmm. So. And the stacking of information upon other cultures and information on other cultures, as he brought up, you know, he brought the Greeks, the Romans, the Christians. Mm-hmm. That's like, that was kind of like a triple stack. But he didn't ever throw in the original ancient Egyptian, which is where the Greeks stem their stories from.
Right, and the Babylonians.
Right. And so, you know, we pay homage. That's why I like that you usually bring up the Vedas too, because that we're closer to the truth in the Vedic text, in my opinion. A lot of times
there's been some corruption, but it definitely touches on it for sure.
Undoubtedly.
I mean, where has there not been corruption?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the stories that we're getting now are not even close to what actually. I mean, you know, I mean, like, so half truth, you know, who knows?
Yeah. The first astrology teacher that I chose to originally study with was this gentleman named Ernst Wilhelm, and I picked Vedic specifically because I assumed that it was the most complete and oldest system that we had, and I was getting really frustrated with the New Age Marxist ideology actually seeping into astrology. And I was getting really frustrated with this stacking and blending of all of the things. Anyway, I picked this guy, and I really liked him because instead of just going off of English translations of Hindu, of translations of Sanskrit, he went and learned Sanskrit so that he could translate Sanskrit to English and skip the whole step of the Hindu translation altogether. Right? Anyway, really appreciate Ernst for
When's the last time you talked to him?
Shout out to him. So when I joined his school, it wasn't a one-on-one type of thing. It was like, hey, here's a video website. Bam, this is all of my work over the past 30 years. Have fun. Try to go in order. And I'm like, it was really overwhelming. So I didn't have any one-on-one interactions with him, which is ultimately probably why I ended up not sticking with the school. It wasn't personal enough for me, I think. But anyway, just really appreciate the people out there that are teaching themselves or learning ancient languages to do these translations so that we can have more accurate information, which actually brings me to just mention this really cool project that kicked off in the early 1990s called Project Hindsight. What was really cool about this is they started going back to old ancient manuscripts and translating them to English and this is where we began to see a renaissance in ancient astrology again, where people started picking it up and learning even older astrology than the like psychological astrology that we have from modern times. But anyway, super cool stuff. Fucking love it. I really appreciate, like I said, yeah, I just appreciate the people learning the old languages, and it makes me feel dumb. I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta go learn some Greek or something. Damn it, but
Latin, let's do it.
Latin, yeah. Chance is already beating us.
Is he? Oh, good job, good job.
Yeah.
I mean, I have Adam Stokes, who you know, he teaches
He's a good dude.
he teaches Latin, and so if I have like an alchemical text or something, I like usually will you know, I will send it over to him. Yeah, I'll be like, what does this say? And he's just like, the egg must crack the golden yolk, and you know, a chemical. Yeah, you're like, oh, okay.
I'm gonna meditate on that for 7 years.
Still don't know what that means. So, goodness. I'm trying to enlarge this photo, but the New York Times doesn't want me to do it. There's a cool article from 1986 called "Vampire on the Moon." Just a story in the New York Times in the 80s.
Didn't even touch on the rabbit or the vampires yet.
Yeah. I mean, the vampire thing is actually, it's like a little, it's interesting because, you know, just like archetypally speaking, you know, earlier you brought up the Draco constellation, and there's a direct connection between vampires and dragons and serpents himself, that serpent energy, because, you know, take out all of the stories you've ever heard about vampire, and let me just retell you what it could be, right? Like, just take out the sunlight, take out all the fangs, take all that out, okay? And picture this.
Nosferatu.
Picture this. Voldemort.
Okay.
That's a vampire. He's a high magician, high sorcerer, who is immortal.
And feeds on others' life source.
Okay? Whatever that is. If it's celestial life force, if it's Deluge, if it's literal and actual blood, if it's whatever it is, right? It doesn't need to be this like, you know, and so that's why I love this like astro kind of connection to vampires. It's like, we're talking about, if you hear dragon lore, you're talking about dragons, right? If they can shapeshift into a bat, they can shape, you know. So birds are often associated with angels because they have hollow bones, you know, they're transporters between this, like, they're like a medium between the spirit realm and our realm, right? So you take that into other flying creatures, and you can associate, like, the vampire is usually associated with butterflies, moths, and bats. Those are the three things that usually they'll be able to put their soul or life force into. The moth, goodness, I'm blanking on the name, but there's a moth specifically, it's on that Silence of the Lambs movie cover where it has the skull on the back of it. It's a family of moths. It's called a hawk moth. It's a very big moth. It's like huge. And you know, that's like on an old Romanian folklore. They're from Africa, these moths, but like, you know, in old folklore, they would say that kill that moth because there's the spirit of a vampire inside that moth. And so you got the moth and the moon, the serpents, the serpent people call, I think what people consider, and I'm not trying to go too conspiratorial with it, but we are, consider the reptilians are what also folktales are calling the vampires of their time. You know, these reptilian people that control the world. Well, you know, I think if we are to like do it, I think
lizard types.
You know, and that's what we consider vampire to be. They can't go out in the sun because they're cold blood lizard types, right? And the fangs, right? Like, you know, so I think vampires are snaky serpent, and that kind of that transformative, that shapeshift that goes in with folk tales and folklore of the moon as well. So the vampire connection is deep there. It's to be interpreted in whatever way, but Yeah, I think next time, because we've been going for a while. Like, let's leave these articles. We have so many articles for the future.
You know what? I think it's very appropriate that we haven't gotten to even touch the rabbit on the moon yet. We're gonna follow the white rabbit and leave that for the next episode. You like that? Oh, you like that? Word. Yep. In the meantime, if you are out there still listening, congratulations, you made it to the end of the episode.
Love you.
We appreciate you. There's so many more connections and so many more things to say on all of these topics, but we only got so much time, and
you got other podcasts to listen to.
You got other podcasts to listen to, and we have more mysteries to explore. So we'll leave it there for today.
But it would be cool if you guys did want to email us or reach out by any means to just tell us what a piquing interest about the moon to you is. Because if you're listening to this show, I assume that you have some sort of piquing interest about the moon. I just have an inkling of a suspicion that it's something that just like tantalizes you as it does us. So please email us, reach out on Telegram, whatever. Because I'm super curious, because we want to talk to everybody. We hold every conversation in high regard, even you crazy lunatics out there, just getting high on the full moon vibes. You're the best. So get your crystals out, throw them in the air. I'll catch them on the other side, and let's have some psychic communications.
Word.
Should we close out on some jams? You want me to jam?
Yeah, you could jam.
Let's jam it.
Oh, dude,
you sure you don't have an outro poem?
I don't have an outro poem this time, but I do have one more thing to kind of get people thinking, especially those conspiratorially minded ones. Oh. So the NASA launch, right, that we were just talking about, just want to give you a couple stats about this rocket, okay? The 322-foot tall SLS rocket, 322, is slightly shorter than the massive Saturn V rockets of Apollo. But the new vehicle is more powerful, generating 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, most of it from its solid rocket boosters. I don't know about you guys, but those are two very suspicious numbers, and I hate running into that kind of stuff while I'm trying to find facts, because that makes me doubt everything. But anyway, that's all I got. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely week. We'll see you guys next time on Moon Mysteries.